as kids, we are told very often at an early age that, don't say that. Don't talk about that. Because you know how kids are, oh my gosh, Uncle Jerry has bad breath, Mom. You're like, don't say that.
Right.
Dillon, just, So you're not supposed to speak the truth about a lot of things because it's uncomfortable. So we build these filters for ourselves, and most of it's to be civil, so we don't say things that are going to offend people or bother people. But it's so ingrained in us as young kids that when we get older, we tend to try to put everything through those filters to try to make what comes out sound like what the other person wants to hear. But it may not always be real, and it may not always be authentic. Sort of a myth that great leaders are tough and they're always right and they've got all the answers. And you know what? Great leaders are vulnerable enough to just say, I don't have all the answers. I need to hear what you're thinking.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Dillon England Show. I am pumped for today's episode. We got a really good friend in the studio here in a little bit with us. His name is Mike Gruley. He is an entrepreneur. He's owned companies, sold companies. He's a great guy, a good friend of mine, mentor to me as well. For his job, he's an EOS Implementer, which stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. Basically, it's a set system of thinking to try to get leadership teams on the same page. Almost 300,000 companies across the world are doing EOS right now. And the goal of it is to help them achieve clarity, simplicity, to achieve their vision. And I really believe Mike is one of the best implementers in doing so. I would be remiss not to shout out our sponsor, Cool Beans Coffee Brewery. They make the best, and I say the best coffee in Michigan. But without further ado, let's jump into today's episode with Mike Gruley. Grab yourself a cup of coffee if you're in the car. Keep your eyes on the road, stay safe, and enjoy this episode. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys there.
So have you read the book, Never Split the Difference?
No,
By Chris Voss?
I have not.
Okay.
I've heard of Chris Voss, though.
Okay. So obviously, a great book for anybody to read. Really great book for people who are facilitators. Like I work in the world of facilitating groups. But I think really good book for people who are podcasting or interviewing, that sort of thing. Just to give you an example, you just mentioned one of them. And I may do this no justice, so if Chris Voss ever sees this, he'll probably say, who is this clown? But he was a hostage negotiator, well, like a very renowned national hostage negotiator. So you talk about terrorism and people holding hostages and all that stuff. His job was to get on the phone and talk to these guys or gals and say, okay, what's the deal? We want $1 million or the guy dies. And you're like, okay, well, what do you do with that? So he's, these guys are highly trained in how to communicate with people to kind of bring the drama down. And of course, the guy on the other end doesn't want the drama to drop. It's just, I said it once, I'm going to say it one more time. Give me my $1 million and a getaway car or everybody dies. And so he shares all the techniques of hostage negotiation, but not to be used in the sense of, I'm going to negotiate with you about something and I'm going to win and you're going to lose. He goes, real negotiation isn't about I win, you lose. It's about finding common ground, finding a common goal between the two of us, because that's what we have to do. So he has these different techniques, and there's 15 of them. But one of them is the one you mentioned. It's just called mirroring, all right? And then there's another one called labeling. But mirroring is just really like using like the last 2 or 3 or 4 words of what you just said and leaving it at that. Because the idea, as he says, when he's negotiating with hostages, is we need information. And we have nothing. We just have some guy on the phone that says, I'm going to kill people if you don't give me money. Okay, I need more information. Well, I can't get in there and go, can you tell me, like, where's this coming from? And what would you, the guy's going to say, hey, stick it where the sun doesn't shine, right?
Yeah.
So if you were to say to me, hey, I'm supposed to have dinner with a friend tonight. Dinner with a friend? Yeah, we're thinking we're going to head down to Detroit. We're going to go to my favorite steak place. And your favorite steak place? Yeah, the name of the restaurant is XYZ. We go there, and last time I was there was on my birthday. Oh, your birthday. And all I'm doing is repeating. I'm not even asking questions. and it gets you to talk. Human beings fill in the missing parts.
Yeah.
And it's really, really valuable. And then the labeling part is just taking something that I suspect about how you're feeling about it. Like I might, using that example, well, I'm going to have a friend coming in from out of town. We're going to go to dinner in Detroit. Oh, dinner in Detroit? Yeah, we're going to XYZ, my favorite place. Oh, your favorite place? Well, I go there every year for my birthday. Oh, that's great. Seems like you really like this place. Those questions start with seems like, sounds like, feels like. Feels like you're excited about that. Oh, yeah, really excited. You know, seems like this was a good friend of yours. Oh, yeah, let me tell you about that guy. And you will go and even does some experiments. There's a master class for it. He does interviews with people and gets all kinds of information and never once asks a question. It's fascinating. So now that I've just told you my big, long story.
Well, sounds like you like this guy.
I've read the book twice.
Yeah.
And if you fly on Delta, you know, they have the little stuff, the content on the back of the seats. They have different series in there of different things, movies and shows, but they have his master class on there. It's free. And every one of those is outlined. He's just sitting in a chair and he's telling you about it.
Doing his thing.
And giving examples and showing him doing it with people. And it is fascinating.
I always thought that would be an interesting job, you know, negotiating with, you know, tough situations. I mean, there's the stress that these people are under to negotiate with robbers, terrorists, whatever, right? Is that the kind of negotiating he did? Or
Absolutely.
Is it,
He is a world-renowned hostage negotiator. As a matter of fact, they
crazy.
even have on his podcast, they have, or on his, in his master class, they have recordings of him talking to some guys that robbed a bank.
Can
and
you
took a bunch of
imagine the
hostages.
absolute pressure of like, I'm about to walk into a situation I know nothing about. If I screw up, people might die.
Absolutely.
The amount of pressure
Wow.
that career entails, but then also the validity, the relief, the like when you win, I know it's not about winning and losing, but if you get the job accomplished, you save people. What an absolutely just fulfilling job.
Yeah, and it always doesn't work out great.
That's the
but he would, it's fascinating to watch him do some of the examples, and he does some play acting with some actors, and it is phenomenal because then he switches the role and says, "All right, now I'll be the terrorist and you be the negotiator." And oh my gosh, I mean, he just tears this person up.
I bet he'd be a good salesman.
I just want my money. Yeah, don't stop asking questions.
Yeah.
So let's face it, if you were in that situation, some crazy kidnapper or whatever, you don't want to tell them anything. You just want whatever you want and let me go. And your greatest fear is it's not going to work out.
Well, most likely that would make a good hostage negotiator is to make the person think that they're getting whatever they want while you're the one actually leading them down the path you want them to go.
Yeah, and they have to believe that you really are going to make it so that, look, we don't want anyone to get hurt, and that includes you. Dillon, I want to help you resolve this. We're going to resolve this, and I want to make sure everyone stays safe. Are you with me on that? I want everyone to be safe. And of course, the hostage guy says, yeah, I want everyone safe. I just want my money. Okay, that's when I get it. So I need you to work with me. I'll work with you. I promise you I'll work with you. So you've got to create that trust.
Yeah, you have a very limited time to create credibility. It is actually interesting how similar hostage negotiators are to like sales, if you think about it. I mean, obviously the stakes aren't quite as high, but let's say you're running a business meeting with a brand new potential client. You have very limited time to build credibility because if they lose that credibility from the beginning of the meeting, you could be talking to a trash can for the rest. Like, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And then you want them, any good salesperson would tell you this, you want them to be the one that they thought of the idea. So what I mean by that is like, let's just say I said, hey, I think this product is perfect for your company and here's why. Okay, that's fine. But what I'd prefer is for them to be like, hey, you know what? I really think this product would be good for our company and here's why. If you can get them to be the one talking versus you telling them, like, so it's the same concept.
Well,
and you get there by mirroring, you get there by labeling, it's the same kind
Chris
of
Voss
thing.
says you want to let them have your way.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
That's what he says. And he really qualifies it by saying, I'm not trying to be manipulative. We're not trying to be dishonest or manipulative. What we are trying to do is get people to talk. And And the reason it's helpful in the world I live in, where I'm coaching leadership teams of companies, is, and I think you just said something to this effect, which is, you can't fix anything, you can't resolve anything, you can't talk about. And what I've come to learn is, and I realize this myself, as kids, we are told very often at an early age that, don't say that, don't talk about that, right? Because you know how kids are, oh my gosh, Uncle Jerry has bad breath, Mom. You're like, don't say that,
Right.
Dillon. Just, So you're not supposed to speak the truth about a lot of things because it's uncomfortable, and it's, and kids are about as truthful as it is.
Yeah.
They say
brutal.
whatever's in here comes right. There's no filter. So we build these filters for ourselves, and most of it's to be civil, so we don't say things that are going to offend people or bother people. But it's so ingrained in us as young kids that when we get older and we're in a relationship, or we have family, or we work in a business setting with team members, or in a sales meeting, we tend to try to put everything through those filters to try to make what comes out sound like what the other person wants to hear. But it may not always be real, and it may not always be authentic. And so, and especially when there's a problem, if I have a disagreement with you and you disagree with me, when I try to sugarcoat and you sugarcoat and I sugarcoat, it just goes round and round and round. And quite frankly, it makes it way worse, and it just festers and gets worse. And so a lot of our work is just getting people to just talk. It's not complicated. Just talk. I can't tell you how many times somebody will come to me and say, I don't know, I got this problem with my boss, Dillon, and blah, blah, blah. I said, have you talked to him about it? They just, look, 20 seconds of courage, 5 minutes of discomfort, you can solve any problem. Sit him down. Wow, how am I going to talk to him about it? Sit him down and talk to him about it. Just talk to him. You're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, and I also think that it depends on, so let's say you have an employee that's frustrated with a boss, right? And if the boss has been characterized by unreasonable behavior, high temper, flares up whenever, that employee is going to be even less likely to communicate what's true. So it shows even the importance as an individual to have the type of personality that people feels like they can come to you. Because like you said, like you've already mentioned, it's tough for people to even have those conversations to begin with because people don't want conflict. Like we are naturally some people are just like conflict, but the average person,
generally speaking,
we don't like it. Conflict isn't fun. We'd prefer to just get along. Yeah. But then when you have the type of person that on top of there's going to be conflict, they're also just a a-hole jerk, it's even harder to have those conversations. Yeah. And so, especially in leadership, I'd be interested to see how you find the balance in your team of being a good leader, strong, courageous leader that people want to follow, while also being approachable, kind, and humble. Because I feel like both are equally important. And I think it's a pretty hard balance to achieve sometimes.
So when you put your fingers on the table there, you put them on the table like they were like it was a spectrum. Like the more you go towards one, the further you get from the other. I would argue that it is more of a pyramid. The better you get at both of those, the more they come together. So great leaders really care. They really give a shit. And you can't fake that. And so let's just say that you're that crazy boss that blows up, and I have a problem, and it's really bothering me. It's a real serious thing, and I need to talk to you about it, but I'm afraid to. So I say, I'm not going to do it because Dillon, he's just going to freak out. Well, you know what? It may not work out the way you want. You may not get what you want, and you may end up who knows what'll happen, but you're going to learn how your boss handles these situations.
Right.
And you may learn that this is a person that you maybe don't need to be working for, because it's what you need. I need to talk to you about this problem. If I can't bring my problem to you, then why am I working here? So it's just not a fit. And great leaders have to create that space. And there's a sort of a myth that great leaders are tough and they're always right and they've got all the answers. And you know what? Great leaders are vulnerable enough to just say, I don't have all the answers. I need to hear what you're thinking, Dillon. I think I have a thought about it. I have a thought. You have a thought. Let's put these thoughts together and figure it out together. And maybe I'm the boss and I have to kind of call that one. But great bosses are not afraid.
Yeah.
So you show me a boss that won't listen, that's probably someone that's really afraid and they just can't open up.
Yeah, and then they're also just creating a culture of people just not talking about what's bothering them because they're afraid to or they don't want to. And so when you have a leader that is abrasive, they're never wrong, right? It's always someone else's fault.
Well,
they're yelling at their teams.
And it might be that they think they can't be wrong because
Right.
I'm the boss.
Right.
So that's not true.
Right. And you just have a terrible culture of never anyone actually saying what they think, right? It's like the one CEO that walks into the boardroom and everyone's talking behind his back, being like, "Oh yeah, we're screwed as a company." Then he walks in, everyone's like, "Hey man,
whatever.
you're doing great."
Whatever you say, Dylan, it's great. Yeah,
we're doing
I love
great.
that idea.
Just a bunch of yes men. Yeah,
Yeah, if no one's
that's the
saying-
worst thing you can do is be surrounded by yes men.
And it's one of the things we drive home heavily with EOS is getting teams to communicate with vulnerability and also forgetting about all the hierarchy. So if you're the owner of the business, I've got 6 people in the room, I have to say, first of all, there are no owners in this room. You don't get to drop the trump card and say, "Oh, I'm the owner and this is the way we're going to do it."
Right.
Then you're not being a team player. You've hired people so that they can help you build something.
Yeah.
So if you're going to just cut them off at the knees every time because you think you have all the right answers, that's never going to work. And it never does work,
Yeah.
at least not for any length of time.
In the circles I'm in, we use the phrase servant leadership a lot, where like I think that's the best. Really, that's just describing what you're describing. The best leaders are the best servants, and generally the time when you are a leader that never serves and only exists to be a leader to be served, you can be guaranteed that you're not a good leader. But if you're the one that's setting the tone for your team, they're watching you, and your team is being like, "Man, he is out serving us." You know you're doing well as a leader. You never want to be said that no one in your team knows the last time you did anything for them, because then then you just know, hey, I'm not leading the way I should be.
Yeah. Another great book, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. The military operates that way. I mean, the officers eat last. The lower ranking people eat first, and they let them eat because that's how they lead.
Yeah.
And
Well, it also sets the precedent for everyone else. If like, hey, if the leader's willing to eat last, I should let my brother go first. And I should let him go, hey, my brother needs this. I'm going to take my coat off my back. I'm going to pull him out of the trouble and battle. Like when you build that culture, it's a snowball effect that starts at the leader and then it goes down from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just modeling that behavior. And, and great leaders create leaders.
Yeah.
They don't, I know we say be a leader that people want to follow, but the reality of it is great leaders create leaders. They have followers, but those followers, if I'm following you because you're a great leader, the reality of it is if you're really a great leader, I'm following you because not only do I believe in what you and the mission or whatever it is, but I want to lead like you too. I'm following your leadership. I love how you lead people, and I want to be just like Dillon, and that's how things grow. That's how we scale things. That's how things get better.
I'll use school as an example of that. My dad's a Christian school principal, and growing up, he always taught me, he's like, hey, let's say I was in 9th grade. I would always be looking at the seniors, being like, man, they're so cool. They can drive to school. They have their license. They're playing on the senior high basketball team. They have everyone's cheering for them. They are cool. So I was a follower of them. I'm like, they are sweet.
Yeah.
But then there was a 2nd grader looking at me, a 9th grader, being like, Dillon was so cool. Dillon was a 9th grader. He's the leading scorer on the JV team.
Oh, man.
He's this, he's that. And then there's a kindergartner looking at that 2nd grader, being like, man, I can't wait till I'm in 2nd grade. I got to eat my own lunch at school. I stay here from 8 to 3 o'clock. Right? So like, that's kind of what you're saying is just because there's a follower somewhere, there's other people going to be looking up to you. So when you're a leader creating leaders, there's going to be more people looking up to the people that are following you. And so you want to be the type of leader that they can emulate to their followers, that they can emulate to their followers, that they can emulate to their followers.
And so on and so on.
And then you create an organization. I mean, that's how organizations are built.
That's right. Great organizations, great leadership, Everyone's rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
Everyone sees the same mission. I think one of the challenges we see in a lot of organizations, whether they be business or even families, but businesses or organizations, is they most business people they don't start in business because they want to run a business. They start in business because there's something they're good at, and they're passionate about it, and they just start doing it. And next thing you know, they got a business. But then there's people in this business that maybe are doing things that they don't like to do or they're not fit to do. There's a value system in the business that might not be shared by everybody. I think, close enough, we'll deliver it tomorrow is good enough. And you say, no, we always deliver on the same day. Well, no one's wrong there. But how do we both exist in the same organization? When a customer calls and says, hey, can you deliver it today? And I say, we get it to you tomorrow, next week maybe. And you say, oh, no, they call. 2 hours later, I'm on it. How do we do that? These are just a value system we have. And again, there's no right or wrong value system. It's just, are we aligned in how we see things so that we all answer questions the same way, we all deliver the same way, we all feel the same way, we all value the same things on behalf of our customers and our employees. That's the part that very often doesn't occur in organizations because they're just busy starting off, getting things done and trying to pay the bills.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation to be had about sharing value systems. And I'm going to get a little bit edgy here, not intentionally, it's just where it's going. I think, so we're being told by government down that we have to hire certain people whether we want to or not. So we have to fit in, hey, you have to have this diversity here, this type of person here, this diversity here. And where I think that fails is, let's just say you have a Christian-run business. So the Christian's the leader, he started it. He believes a lot of principles of like being kind, loving others, being generous. So he wants to hire a lot of people that believe the same thing. You want to be kind, you want to be loving, you want to be generous. So that's their value system. Their company exists to hire people that believe that you should be kind, be loving, and be generous, right? Well, then when you're forced to all of a sudden hire somebody that doesn't have the same values you have, but you need to because of DEI or diversity or whatever, I sometimes think that's maybe a big issue for companies. So how, if you're a business owner, do you balance finding people with your core values and then also dealing with a lot of the social pressure to fit in the mold of making sure you're hiring the right type of people?
That's a good question, but I would say this. So let's say you have your organization and you've been told you have to have a certain number of tall people, a certain number of short people, a certain number of men and women, okay? Fine. All it does is it might just lessen the pool. So let's say you're down, you've got all your DEI met, but you need one tall guy.
Right.
Well, all that means is you've got to find someone that fits your core values that's a tall guy.
Right.
Now, you might meet 100 people that fit your core values, but it's a short woman or it's a short guy or a tall woman. You just get to say no there because if that's important to you to meet the DEI, but also critical to you have the same value systems, then it's just going to make it a little tougher to hire.
Yeah. But
you're willing to put up, if you believe in the DEI and you believe in your core values, it is what it is, and you're just going to have to struggle through that. If someone were to literally force you and say, here's Bob, you don't know him?
Yeah.
He's working for your company now. That would be a situation because you'd say, well, Bob is a dirty, rotten scoundrel, and we don't do that stuff here. Well, too bad. And we're giving you Bob. I don't even know Bob. To all the Bobs out there, sorry. But, but that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
All it does is just narrow the pool if you want to be.
You just have to, it might take more time to find the person that you really want at your company.
It just does. And really companies have that challenge anyways because, they may be looking for the best salesman around, and you can interview a lot of salesmen and say, we met Dillon. This guy is the greatest salesman. He sells better than anyone. But you know what? The way he behaves and the way he does things, it's not our value system here at ABC Company. Yeah. And I think the gain of having this great sales guy is more than offset by the fact he doesn't fit our culture. And culture, as far as I'm concerned, is the be-all, end-all. I've built companies that were, I call them transactional, great, talented people, and we all get along. We all know what we're doing. We relatively get along, but We didn't work on the value part much. It just, you can be successful, but it's just, it's harder. It's sometimes ickier, but it's just harder. I've also built teams of people that genuinely have care and concern for each other. I mean, we really loved each other. And like people who loved each other, we didn't always agree.
Right.
But we could have really great disagreements, in our room about, no, that's crazy. No, it's not. We fight it out. And at the end, I go, all right, Dillon, I hear you. Let's try it your way. And then we accomplished great things. We loved every minute of it. We suffered through the failures ourselves, the challenges, and we celebrated together the victories. And that, in my humble opinion, that's what really great teams are made of, is healthy teams. You can always get smart. You can always figure out skills and all that.
I'll tell you a good example of what you're talking about is the Detroit Lions ever since Dan Campbell took over. Because, you have teams that are going to bring in the best talent, but that person might not fit your culture. And what Dan Campbell and general manager there, and they said, look, number one, character. We look at people's character first. Then we look at their talent as football players.
It's just core values.
And that's it is.
Doesn't mean he's right or wrong. He's just choosing.
What's important to them? Hard work, integrity, whatever. So whatever their core values is.
That's it.
That's what they're basing their draft on. They may even take someone with less talent that they know is going to outwork someone else. And most likely they're probably going to turn into a better player because they have hard work as an integral part of who they are. And so everyone they bring into the Lions organization are good people that are hard workers, that are good at football. Yeah. And you might have someone who's maybe a little bit better at football, but if they don't have these core values, they're not on the team. They're not getting signed. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Detroit organization in the past 4 years have made this 180. Because Dan Campbell said, this is the type of players we're going to have. We're sticking to this. These are our core values.
Yep.
And then now they've built a team that loses together, that wins together, that has each other's backs, that want to resign. Now you have football players looking outside in, being like, I want to take part of that organization.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, and so it's exactly what you're talking about.
That's what happens. And that's why, even though I deal in businesses, it's the same. It's the same with families, organizations, nonprofits. I'd say it's the number one thing we change first in an organization is getting them to all realize, what kind of culture do we have here? Who are we? And there's no wrong culture.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, so if you were a member of the mob, right? So maybe you've got some shady dealings and maybe now and then some people disappear and that sort of thing. If I wanted to work for you and you said to me, well, Mike, we break the law a lot and we do some stuff and, I might say, that's not for me, right?
Right.
It's not my culture, But there might be some guy out there that says, I get to do that stuff? Like if someone really ticks me off, I can take them for a drive.
Yeah.
I love that. So it's a culture. It's not
but
one
when
we
you say culture,
admire.
though, even within, let's just keep going down the mafia illustration, wouldn't you say that those are still better cultures than others and like the most ideal ways to run a business? You might have a mafia that's all family and they love each other and they're supportive. And then you have one where like grandpa owns everything. He's vindictive and evil and like no one trusts each other. You would argue that the one culture that has significantly more, kindness and generosity in their culture is probably going to be more successful? Or do you think that there's or even back to business, if you have like a company culture that's just toxic, rough, just the business owner is a complete D-bag?
I think what you're asking is, what if we had a business where everyone was just dog eat dog, tear them apart, mean, nasty?
Right. Because you said there's no good or bad culture. I would
say if that. Well, I would first say, if that's the culture of your business, so all the people in your business believe that, let's say we're in a dishonest business. We're always living on that gray area, right? Mm-hmm. I couldn't live that way. Most people can't. But there's some people that might say, it's close enough. Well, you better have all the people on the team that believe that. Now, how that affects your customers might be a whole other story. You might end up losing your business. You might end up getting a write-up in the newspaper, and you're going to end up going bankrupt. But putting that aside, if that's the culture you want, then that's the kind of people you're going to attract.
Right.
If I'm a dishonest guy, I'm going to say, I got to go work at that company over there because I can get stuff done.
So define your culture, and then make sure that you find the people that are going to thrive in your culture and believe in it. So whatever that culture may be is kind of what you're saying.
Absolutely. And, think about everything has a culture. But think about, there's different religions in the world, and they all have their own cultures, and they're all good. They all want good things. But one might fit better for you than for me or the next person. So they're just different ways that we function together as human beings. And what we're trying to do is provide that environment where people can thrive. And that's what businesses should do. If you're a leader, you need to provide a culture that is going to enable the people that fit that culture to thrive, to be happy, to love their work, to get better at their work. Because I don't mind going and studying and learning and getting training on something I love. So I'm going to get better personally. So in some ways, what you're doing is you're creating better people. And if you create great people and put them all together and they all love being together, the whole business just does better anyways because everyone's on the same page.
How does a leader deal with like we talked about this before, entrepreneurs are lonely people. They can feel like it's a lonely game.
I wouldn't say they're lonely people. It's a lonely place.
So it can feel like they're alone, whether they are or
absolutely not. They do feel alone.
And so how does a leader get out of the rut? So let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, yeah, this is all awesome. I've tried to create a good culture. Nobody comes along with me. We read the book Traction, and nobody believes the core principles that I do. It's just me. I'm the only one that gets it. No, I feel I'm deflated. I've tried. Like, what do you tell a leader / entrepreneur that is struggling to try to build a culture when he feels like he's just reading Roblox?
You really challenged me. But I would say that if you had what you said, a business owner, let's say you have 10 employees, and you decide one day we need to build a culture. You don't just create a culture. You have a culture. There's a culture whether you realize it or not. So much of it is just assessing what culture do we have. And there's some exercises we take people through to discover the culture. Because it's not like a billboard where you say, all right, so here's what we want here. That's not how that works, because that could be very aspirational. Again, it'd be like if I were a dishonest guy and go, I really want an honest culture. And you might say, Mike, I've known you for years. I got to be honest. You're not you're a dishonest guy, right? So it's more about discovering the culture you have. And if you have an owner that says, I can't get people on board, well, why don't we talk about the culture that we have here? Do we have a culture that's just like, we don't like learning? We don't like growing? This is how we've always done it. Why are we changing? That's a culture. It might not be one that's conducive to growth, but then you have to ask yourself, do we need to grow? Maybe we're fine just sitting back. I don't know if that's usually a good strategy, but nonetheless, it's a choice. So once you can identify what your culture is, then you can try to figure out, is that the culture you want? Now, in this case, it might be the owner that doesn't fit everybody else and say, somehow this culture has been created, and I don't like it.
Yeah, well, that's a key point. It's when you're looking at your company, or you're looking at your, even your family, or you're looking at whatever you're looking at, it's not the fact that you need to create your culture, it's the fact you need to change your culture. That's what you were just saying, right? It's like there's already a culture there.
Or find your culture.
Yeah.
So, there's a culture there. So, well, let's just say that you had this business and a bunch of salespeople, and you just sort of found out that your salespeople were all very dishonest. Now, let's say you're selling a lot of stuff, but you're just a super honest guy. You're like, I can't have this. So you have to decide, why are they doing this? Are these just dishonest people? They just don't think that matters. I don't think very many people just want to be dishonest.
Right.
But in your judgment, they're doing business differently than how you might do it. Well, you're the owner of the business, so you have to say, I think I have the wrong culture here, and I don't want to grow this culture. Maybe it's going to mean that you have to reassess what has happened, because cultures create themselves.
Yeah.
EOS has a brand new book called People, Dare to Build an Intentional Culture. It's one of their best books of the whole library. It's fantastic. But it's about this. It's like you get to be intentional about the culture you have. Think about your family, you and your wife, and you have a young baby, and you're probably going to have, I'm probably 7 or 8 more, I'm sure. But you're going to create a culture for the England family.
Right.
And whatever that is, that culture might be work hard or study hard or go to school or please and thank you and call older people by Mr. and Mrs., whatever it is, that's the culture. It may not be the culture in other people's families, but that's yours. And even your kids may come home someday and say, wow, I was over at my friend's house and they don't have they call their mom and dad by their first name.
Everyone's throwing tantrums.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with calling your mom and dad by their first name. I didn't grow up that way.
Yeah.
But it's just a different culture.
Yeah.
And so this is what you do in a business. It's just like a family.
Well, what an opportunity, right? I think so many times, like let's just say I was going to start a business and we wrote down, let's say I didn't have good coaching. I just wrote down like, okay, I need to be profitable. I need to make sure my income's more than my expenses. I need to make sure we have a good thing to sell. I need to make sure that we have a good sales process, a good logistics process. And so many times I think that entrepreneurs could focus on all of this other stuff.
Are we talking about core values with all those things you listed?
No, I'm saying I think that they don't. That's what I'm saying.
Those are goals.
Yeah, they're just like they forget about the opportunity they do have to create a good culture. And when they do create a good culture, everything else will happen. But I wonder if a lot of times entrepreneurs flip it. So they're like, okay, we got to get things moved first. We got to make sure we have income. Okay, we'll deal with culture when we can.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
What an opportunity people have to create a culture. I mean, that's a really cool thing. Like, imagine how many employees that are listening to this and they're just thinking, man, if only I was the business owner, because then I could create a culture. Like, that is such a unique opportunity that so many entrepreneurs have. Like, it's awesome. Like, you're telling me that if you create a company, you get to set the standard for how your company treats each other, treats employees, does work. Like, that's a great responsibility that we don't think about that much.
Well, and you say set it too, but here's what it is. A lot of it comes from the leaders. So let's say you start a company from scratch.
Right.
And I know you well, Dillon. I know the kind of guy you are and that sort of thing. So you call me up and say, Mike, I'm starting this company and I think you might be a good guy to come work for us. Well, what's the first thing goes in my head? Before he even told me about the company, I'm like, well, I like Dillon. I think he's a good guy. We share a lot of the same feelings about things and he's a good family guy. I'm just evaluating you. Because if you're some guy that I go, oh my God, I can't believe this guy called me. This guy, I used to know this guy. He's just trouble. Well, I didn't even ask what the opportunity was.
Yeah.
But I'm not interested because I don't have. So generally speaking, I wouldn't assume that a business doesn't have a good culture. Most successful businesses, I think there's a direct correlation between good cultures and successful businesses. So usually they have very successful businesses because they've already cultivated a good culture. And that usually started with the owners or the people that started at the beginning. And I signed up with you because I believe what you believe about stuff. I believe we should treat customers a certain way, like you believe. All the things you believe, I believe. Doesn't make them right or wrong. I just happen to believe them. So you've attracted me. But over time, though, I'll go the next step. So the business starts that way as a nice little culture. And I think Simon Sinek refers to this as the split. Everything's kind of going great. And then at some point, there's a split because we've got so many people we've hired, and we really don't have time to delve into they don't even know who Dillon England is.
Right.
I'm just working for this really cool company, and they're growing like crazy. And now people are coming on board that maybe don't share the exact same values because we're busy. Yeah. We have stuff going on. And so sometimes those companies start hitting ceilings there, and they can't figure out why. And then when you look back at it, you realize, boy, that Mike guy we hired, he just doesn't do things the way we do it. How did that happen?
What does an employer do? Because I'm not very familiar. I only have one staff on my team, and we very gratefully share many core values. How does a staff or how does a business owner deal with like labor laws and lawsuits when you fire? So let's just pretend you have a company that you hire someone and let's say you made a mistake. Maybe they're doing okay at their job. Like they haven't really like stolen money or done anything necessarily like fire-worthy, but they're a toxic person that doesn't meet your core values. They're a detractor to your organization. But they haven't really, that's the only thing. They're still showing up and doing their job. They're moving widgets. I know I've heard stories of people going through lawsuits for firing people for different reasons. I'm not familiar with that at all. But do you know with your information, can you just fire people based off of like you don't like them and you're trying to build a different culture? Because I know that's a gray area.
Well, that's a legal question that
Right.
I am not qualified to answer. But, the idea with culture and organizations is to try to, like I said earlier, try to create an environment where people can thrive. And if they're not going to thrive in that environment, have the understanding that you come to me, just going back to that part about if you're a boss that I feel like I can talk to,
Yeah.
I can say, you know what, I don't know why I'm not producing this job, but I don't know if I really like it that much. And you put me in this job, I thought it'd be something different, whatever. Okay, well, how can we find you a place where you can thrive here? Because if you can't, we'll help you thrive somewhere else. I know of a company that they had a department that was for helping people find better jobs for people that didn't work in their organ. So they hired us, and Dillon and Mike just aren't working out. And they said, okay, it's not working out. And through a series of interviews and conversations, they find out that you'd like something different, I'd like something different. They actually had a department that said, we're going to help you find the job you need because that's the kind of company we are. We want to attract the best people. We want the people that fit here. And we don't disparage or judge people that don't fit us because we're not right just because we have a culture. We just have a culture.
Right.
So let me find you a place where you're going to fit and be happy. So here you have a company.
Awesome.
You have a company that I could literally get. Maybe I'm getting fired from it, but I'm saying I worked for them a few years ago. It didn't work out, but man, they got me this new job. They helped me find out first of all what I really wanted. And they got me hooked in with a placement company, got me another job, and I'm still at that job. I mean, I'm glad I went and worked for these guys. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's showing genuine care and concern for the people that you were responsible for. Because I often tell owners this, when you have an employee that's not working well in your organization, it's not their fault as much as it is yours. You brought them in. Your job is to let them know what it's expected of them, what the culture is, how you operate, and let them know what you will do for them so they know what to expect from you. And if it's not a fit, sometimes it's just not a fit, but it's your job to do your best to give them as much information so they know what they're getting into. And if it doesn't work out, then help them find somewhere else.
That's a really good point, is that you make the owner, the HR, whoever, you're the one who hired them. And so you shouldn't be so quick to just be like, oh, yeah, you're gone. It's like, no.
Well, you know your organization better than anybody.
You saw something in them in the interview process that you wanted to explore and you thought they'd be a good fit. So you owe it to them to make sure you're giving them the best shot possible here at your organization or at least with another. And that's a really cool way to kind of do business. It's like, hey, if it's not here, maybe it's somewhere else. And I do think that if you hire someone, if you are doing interviews, you are bringing on people and core value is your focus, I don't think you miss very often on your hires. You're going to miss way less than if you're hiring for other reasons.
Absolutely. Now, Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team book, all the other great books, The Advantage, talks about healthy and smart. And smart being all the things you need to run a great business, right? Really smart and a lot of technology and talented, skilled, all that. Healthy, people that low drama, can communicate well, look out for each other, share the same value system, all that. We tend to focus on smart because that's the most tangible thing. You're looking for an accountant, right? Well, I want to get the best CPA in town, right? This guy's smart. This lady knows her stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I think you said earlier, well, we'll get the talent part done first, and we'll worry about the culture thing later. Well, imagine you hire me in as an accountant, and I'm the best accountant around, but I don't fit the vibe of your company. I'm going to be unhappy. And so it doesn't work. So what we need to focus on is the healthy part of an organization. Because as he says, the healthy part is the accelerator of the smart part, the skilled part. And I think you said this with the Lions, they're all really skilled players.
Yeah.
And there's millions skilled NFL players, but they're only hiring certain ones. And the ones that fit that value system are going to fit better because you can bring in a prima donna, some really super talented person, but if they don't jive with the vibe of the team, it's disruptive.
Yeah.
So you want to bring in the right people that share those values first, but we tend not to think of that because it sounds fluffy and soft and squishy and all that. And I would freely admit, being open and honest, as a young man, if someone would have came to me about core values and running my businesses, I would have said, well, what a bunch of crap. We're all going to sit around and sing Kumbaya, blah, blah. But by the time I was in my mid to late 30s, and even especially in my 40s, I started to realize that it's all about the people and people working together and really loving working together. And I didn't care if it sounded squishy or soft or weak. It's not. It's strong. And it's what builds the best organizations, the most lasting organizations, too.
One of the things I love about what you do is you do what you're doing now because of you practice it when you own companies.
Yeah, heavy on the word practice.
Right.
Yeah.
You tried.
Oh my gosh. I never learned much. I never learned much from my successes. I learned a ton from all the screw ups.
Well, that's a good mark of a good leader that does that, right?
I hope so. I don't know. I'm still a work in progress.
Yeah. So I know I'll put in the intro. People, we talked a lot more about EOS last time, but I think that one of the reasons why you're so successful, and I can tell the way you talk about this, is that you're passionate about it. You love this stuff.
I do love this
You're
stuff.
doing what you're doing because it made a difference in your companies and in your life, and you're like, hey, like this is something I'd love to do for others. And I think a lot of people that find what they love is as a result of them being affected by it.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, anyway, I just thought that was a really unique thing. Like when you talk, I'm like, man, I can just tell Mike loves this stuff. Have you?
I was going to say, it's like when I talk to you about podcasting.
Yeah.
I mean,
my wife gets mad at me. I don't shut up about it.
You light up, man. I'm telling you, I've known you a while, and you really do light up. And this is what I love when I see in business people. When someone tells me they have a business, and I say, "Tell me about your business," they go, "Well, we do this and we do that. Okay, you got a business." Then there's those that I say, "What do you do for your business?" And they go, "Oh man, dude, all right, so you got to hear this. This is so cool." Those are the people that love. And that, by the way, that's their culture.
And by the way, those are the people you want to be with. Those are the people you want to surround yourself with.
Yeah, that's a one-person culture, right?
Absolutely.
So if I'm like a Debbie Downer and you're looking to hire an accountant or something, and let's say I'm that great accountant, but I'm like a Debbie Downer, like, oh, yeah, we're doing a podcast, but you're not going to hire me.
Right.
You're going to say, the dude's just a downer, man.
Yeah.
I want someone that's going to be excited about it.
And downer is contagious. When you surround yourself by people that are always downers, maybe your business is actually going well. But when you call this friend, you're like, oh, man, our business is struggling. Okay, you call the next buddy. Yeah, man, it's down. All of a sudden, you're going to be like, man, I don't know why, but I don't feel.
We can't win.
Yeah, I don't feel good, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I love when we go and hang out with those entrepreneurs in Northville and, everyone's talking and sharing what they're doing. And like Dino, for example, just being an absolute encourager. For the people listening, there is this gentleman who is just a massive success in what he does. And he has no need to have an interest in anything I'm doing. But I met him about 3 months ago. He asked me about the podcast, whatever. I told him about it, shared him the link. I sat down, and the first thing Dino says to me was like, hey, man, I've been listening to your podcast. It's great stuff. And this guy's like a very successful man who has zero responsibility to encourage me in any capacity, right? I'm lucky to even, sit in the same room with him. And he goes out of his way to just be an encourager. And that makes such a difference, man. When you hang around people like that, it makes you want to just continue that. And then the people that look up to me, like I feel like I haven't done anything yet. And then I have someone like Dino or you saying, Dillon, man, like this is big encouragement. You got this. I want to do that to the next generation of people.
You pay it forward.
Exactly.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what entrepreneurs, and a lot of people are, but speaking specifically of entrepreneurs in the world I live in, entrepreneurs are big on that because, as you said earlier, it's kind of a lonely place. Being an entrepreneur is a tough thing. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of things. Raising kids can be really tough. So guess who you hang out with? Other people that have kids.
Yeah.
And, you share your story.
The worst thing that can happen is when you get advice from people that don't have kids. You know what I mean?
They can read a lot of books and stuff, but there's not anything like having
talk.
your own kids. And
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and when you have kids, you know, you hang out with other people with kids, and of course, you think your situation with your child or children is so unique until you go hang out with a bunch of parents, especially ones that are older, and you won't believe what my kid did. Yeah, my kid did that 8 times. And it's not that they're belittling your challenge. It's just that they're letting you know that you're going to be okay, and you're unique.
Well, yeah,
just like
there's an
everyone else.
encouragement in numbers, right? There's like a familiarity, like, hey, I'm not alone in this.
That's right.
This parent their teen went through a rebellious stage too, or their 1.5-year-old started throwing their toys too. And like, oh, maybe I'm not as bad of a parent as I thought I was.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe this is just what happens, and I need to learn how to get through it, right? And that's again, when we talk about, even if you're not an entrepreneur in anything in life, when you can build community with positive people, encouraging you to do right, and those are the circles you build yourself with, good things happen.
Now think about that. Just a community of people, friends and colleagues and people that you hang out with.
Yeah.
That's a culture. I mean, you didn't sit down and say, this is my culture and here's where we're going to talk. You didn't. You just started hanging out with different people, and some you hang out more than others, and pretty soon you get to a point where you have this posse of people that you call, you look for advice, you give advice, you help out.
Yeah.
If you stop and think about all these people that you surround yourself with, I would guess that if you had to describe them with descriptive words, you'd say, those are the same words I probably describe myself. That's a culture.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Yeah, and people matter. Who you hang out with matters. And like, we talk about, like you imagine, like you see this all the time in like high school when this like guy and girl start dating. You know, maybe this guy is like really clean cut looking person. All of a sudden he starts hanging around this girl that's smoking weed with dreads and all that stuff. And next thing you see, the appearance just starts shifting into who they're hanging with, right? And you might have someone who used to be really respectful. They started dating this dude that's a complete dirtbag. 3 years pass, and all of a sudden they're both dirtbags. Well, and like, or vice versa, right? Like, so it's just an amazing thing where who you hang around can impact who you are.
Oh, it does.
And so when you surround yourself with detractors, complainers, negative thinkers,
victims,
next thing you know, you're just like them. And you might be thinking, oh, I have a great community. We're just honest. We're raw. We're authentic. It's like, no, you're just complainers that aren't doing anything. Whereas if you hang around, because that's an excuse I hear a lot. Oh, no, we're just raw and authentic. But there's never any time where someone just goes and slaps you in the face and, okay, come on, like turn this around.
Yeah.
There's no accountability there. You can be raw and authentic, but still be lazy and still be complaining. Yeah. You know, it can't just be authentic. There has to be action behind it and wanting someone to have accountability and improve. So a good organization or a good group of people is one that says, hey, we are raw and authentic, we are loving, but when we see one of our friends go in a direction they shouldn't go, we see a business owner that's starting to become lazy and starting to become a complainer, hey, we're going to bring them back in. Hey, we don't act like that.
How can we help?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so,
it's a community culture.
And so anyway, if you're not careful, it can just turn into Complainville and everything's down. And that doesn't help anybody, is pretty much my point.
Well, there's that old saying about you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most.
Yeah.
And I believe that to be true. And again, that speaks to culture. You know, you got a group of people and you all just kind of, like, as, you know, my wife and I still have all these friends that we have that we might not have had if we didn't have kids. Because you go to the soccer games and all the recitals and the schools and stuff, and you meet these people. And the only thing we might have in common is that we have kids that are on the same team or whatever. They all have different walks of life, different ways of living, but they're our friends because we've shared this common journey, and that becomes our own little culture with that group.
Right.
So culture is everywhere, and like I said, there's no bad or good cultures. They just are. Yeah. And so when you're building any kind of organization, it's good to be intentional about it. Just discover what you have as a culture. And then what it'll do is it oozes out of whatever you're doing. So the culture you have, whether you realize it or not, is oozing out to the world. And what you find is the people that don't really buy that culture, they just don't call you. They don't show up. They don't want to work for you. They don't want to come to your party. And the ones that really dig it, they want to show up. And they even want to say, how can I be part of it? And then even ones that are in your group that eventually feel like, I don't know if I fit anymore. This is not for me. It's not what I want. They just self-select and go find what they want. So it really is a natural progression of how things go, and it really is a great way to run any organization or business, or even just a group of people.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
Have you ever read The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss?
no.
Okay. So Tim Ferriss wrote a book a while
4
ago.
hour
The
work
4-Hour Work Week. Good book to read. Kind of the book that really kind of took off for him. But so we're talking a lot about the entrepreneur side, but I also have a lot of listeners that are employees. They're
Okay.
not entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
They're employees. And so one of the things that Tim Ferriss talks about in the book, The 4-Hour Work Week, is how you can have conversations with your boss and the people in charge to get you to create almost like the culture for yourself. So let's just say the company isn't where you want. Let's say the company culture is you have to show up 5 days a week. You can't ever have days off. You have only a week of vacation. You have whatever. And so in his book, The 4-Hour Work Week, he talks a lot about like remote work. He talks a lot about negotiating what your job looks like with your employer. So I do think, though, if you're listening to this and the people that are like, man, my culture at my company sucks, like it's just terrible. I hate it there. The business owner is just unreasonable, but there's actually room to change that. And so what Tim Ferriss talks a lot about is saying, hey, number one, you need to be a high performer. If you're a high performer and do you need to take that? Okay, cool. All right, just making sure. In your company, if you are a high performer, you actually have a little bit more leverage than actually I think you realize. And so what he talks a lot about is saying, hey, create a plan. What is your ideal and working environment as an employee? What would you love? Would you want to show up 3 times a week, 2 times a week, 1 time a week, 5 times a week? You want to work remote? You want to travel to Europe and be able to do your job, still going to Italy, Europe, France? Like what is it? Like just create it as an employee. Create what you would love. You might love your job, but if you hate your environment, how can you make both work? So you just say, hey, I want to travel. I want to travel more. That's what I really want to do. But I can't because I'm stuck at this job. I can't go anywhere. But I want to travel. I can't travel. How can I make it happen? And so he talks a lot about creating a plan that during your review you present to your employer. And so you're just like, hey, you sit down for your review meetings, or you call a meeting, you're like, hey, Dave, I know you're my manager. I wanted to talk to you about something. So as you know, for the past 6 months, I've been the highest producer here. I'm top level. You know that there's no one better than I am. But I have a couple of issues, and I was hoping we could talk about them, together. I really want to start traveling, man. But I also want to keep doing my job. And I actually think that I can keep doing my job at the same level if I'm allowed to travel. I'm asking that you just give me a test. You just a trial run at this. Let me do this for 3 months, whatever it is. I come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I'm off every Thursday, Friday. Give me 3 months. And if at 3 months I'm in underproduction, I'll go back the way you want it. But in 3 months, if I'm still hitting all the numbers you want, doing everything you want from me, you keep letting me work like this. And no, it might not always work, but Tim Ferriss's way of like people that always feel like they're trapped and they can't have conversations goes back full circle to what we talked about, having conversations with people.
Can't fix anything you can't talk about.
Right. So you start talking about those things, hey, every Friday at 3, my kid has a softball game and I miss it for work. I'd love to figure out a way that I can make it to my kid's softball game. Here's a plan that I've come up with.
Great conversation to have.
Right. And so, and I think it's feasible. So if you are, my point of bringing that up is when we talk a lot about culture, a lot of people could be rolling their eyes. They're like, well, if I had control of it, I would change it. But I think that you have more control of it than you realize.
All right. So the very first thing you said there is you said, not everyone listening is an entrepreneur. They might be employees.
Yeah.
I would say that everyone's an entrepreneur, including people that work somewhere as an employee. My kids are employees at places, and I tell them, you're an entrepreneur because you have to create value for yourself. If I sold these microphones, how am I going to get you to buy my microphone? Well, I'm going to make sure it has everything you want. It's going to be high quality. The price is going to be right, the value, because there's a lot of other people making microphones out there. So long and short of it is, if I do a really good job and serve you well, you'll buy my microphones. You might even accept the fact that it takes 8 weeks to get them. You might pay more, depending on how well I've done with my microphones. And you can use that with anything, restaurants, food, whatever, travel. employees often, I think, mistakenly believe that they are, and it might be a little victim mentality, that they don't have any control. But you have control, because if you do your job, and I think you mentioned this, if you do your job super well, fitting to what the company needs, the culture, all that, you're doing all those things. As an employer, I'm inclined, or you're inclined to say, how can I help you? How can how important is this to you? Because I also have other people that want stuff, and I got to be fair about how this works. So there's that complicated part. We might just say our culture's not one where we all work remotely. We're not.
Yeah.
Some are, we aren't. But at least put yourself in the situation where when you ask me about something, I want to help as best I can because I value you. Now, if you're the guy that's the slacker and comes in late and
you're not in any place to be asking.
You don't have any leverage. You're going to
Exactly.
ask, and then when I say I can't do that, you're going to go, "Oh, Mike's a jerk. He just doesn't care and all that." Well, so everything works that way. I mean, have you ever driven a long distance to go to your favorite restaurant or something like that? Why did you do that? There's one right down the street.
Right.
Well, it's worth it. They've created a value proposition that I will do something I normally don't do.
Yeah.
So when people want to ask an employer to do something they normally wouldn't do, they're basically using the leverage of their own business, because you are a business.
Right.
You work.
That's a good point.
You're a business inside of a business.
Yeah.
And the other thought I have too is that people that just expect raises over time, that's fine. You might get cost of living sort of thing. People complain, I don't get many raises. What more value do you bring to the company? Find ways to bring value, because not only will they pay you if you ask, they have to. Because I know as an employer, if I have someone that's really, really good at something, you know what's on my mind? Am I taking care of Dillon? Am I giving him what he needs? I love this guy. Yeah. He's really good. I know other people are calling him, as they should, and I want to make sure he's happy and he stays here. So I'm actually thinking about how I can make your life better. You want to work 4 days a week? I know you didn't ask me, but I'm just wondering. You seem like you have your kids' sports on Fridays. How can I work that out? Why are you telling me this, Mike? Because I value you.
Well, here's a pro tip to a lot of people listening is in most industries right now, good employees are hard to find. And if you're a good employee, most likely you can rest assured that that company does not want to lose you.
Right. They'll do the best they can. They
and
can't
I mean,
always give
obviously
you
they're not going to, you're going to go walk in there, ask for $1 million a year and get all pride. That's not my point. But my point is if you stay humble, you're trying to do what's best for your family and what's best for the company, there's probably a good chance that they're going to try to figure things out with you.
Yeah.
But again, if you never ask and you never have that conversation, and one thing my dad always taught me that has always stuck with me when it comes to asking for something outside of the norm, right? Maybe that other people aren't getting. He would do this all the time with me. So let's say I want to go to a sleepover of someone's house, like a buddy's, like we're going to play video games till 3 a.m., to have fun, whatever. Me and my buddy Seth, we used to eat Fig Newtons and sparkling grape juice. That was just,
It's what you do when you're young.
When I'm young, it was just the best combo. You don't want to get like all this sparkling grape juice and Fig Newtons. Yeah, now I would just probably throw up. But back then, dude, we'd pound those suckers. Go with Monster, energy drinks. And so whenever I go to my dad to ask for, hey, I would never say, hey, can I go to a sleepover? That's not what I would do. Because without fail, my dad would be like, well, is there anything that your mom has asked you to do that you haven't done yet? And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot mom asked me to do the trash and mow the grass and clean my room. But I'll do that when I get back from the sleepover. Would never work. Wouldn't fly.
That didn't work.
So what I would always do is I'd go to my mom first. I'm like, hey, Mom, is there anything you need me to do this weekend? She's like, yes. I need you to do this, 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 this. I'm like, okay, great. I go do them. Get them all done. Then I go to my dad. Hey, Dad, I'd love to go over to Seth's this weekend. Just wanted to let you know, Mom asked me to mow the grass, take out the dog. We didn't even have a dog, but you know what I mean. Like we did all these things. Chores. They're already all done. And in fact, I also just cleaned the garage just because I had time.
Really hard to say no.
Right. I've done everything. Is there anything else you need me to do? But I really love to go to Seth's house. I believe I've fulfilled everything I need to do around the house. Because the tension was always, I'd stay up till 4 a.m. I'd come home exhausted. I'd sleep till noon. I'd miss all the time. And so it was just a good negotiating thing. Like, hey, before I even make the ask, I want to tell you all the things that I've done. And it was just something my dad always taught me. He's like, don't come to me before you've actually checked with your mother, before the things you do. And so now when I don't have a job where I have to ask for a raise because I'm lucky to be in a job where I just have control over that.
Yeah.
And if I'm ever in the position again, it would be the same thing. It would say, hey, Mr. Bossman, I just finished these 7 projects, and actually all 7 clients love them. They're all happy. They've all written a positive review. And in fact, I also just did this, this, and this. That binder you wanted next month is already done. Just curious, here's my question. Preface that. And all of a sudden, the employer's like, man, this is a good employee. I don't want to lose this guy.
Yeah.
And then you have an actual case for what you're asking for. So it's just a lesson my dad taught me. When you make a request,
Seems like your dad has a lot of great pieces of wisdom.
he's an administrator of a school. And so
yeah.
he does culture and team building and
So
this
this
stuff
is right
for a
in his
living.
wheelhouse.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
a smart guy. He's one of the smartest guys I know.
Yeah. You reference him a lot of
Yeah.
great lessons.
Yeah. People always say that I take after my dad. I'm like, I probably do. I'm adopted, so I don't necessarily have his actual, brain power necessarily. But
Yeah.
when you live with someone and you just by osmosis, again, proving your point, right?
It's a culture. It's a
Yeah,
culture in the
when-
England house. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My dad. So that was just a lesson I've always learned. And anyway, my dad also talked about the levels of initiative. So he had like 5 levels of initiative.
What are those? How's that work?
So level 0 is wait until forced. So he talked a lot to the students about this, and he talked a lot about, hey, when you have a job, like these are what employers are going to look
So in other
for.
words, I don't do anything until I'm forced to do it.
You're
Okay.
like you're forced to, like, if you're a kid, you're like,
Backs against the wall.
yeah,
gotta do
you're
it.
gonna get like slapped with a belt, or I'm not doing it. You know what
Gotcha.
I mean?
Yeah.
And then it's wait until told. So you're just like playing video games. You're not going to take out the trash until you're told to do. That's level 1.
All right.
Level 2 is ask what to do. So this is what's interesting. People think when they think about initiative, they think about, hey, if I'm asking what to do, that's pretty good.
Not
I'm
bad.
showing
For a
initiative.
kid especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then as you get older, it's like I have this happen with my agents all the time. They call me and they're just like, hey, what do you want me to do today? And I keep thinking, you're only on level 2. I need you to get to level 4. And so level 2 is just, hey, ask what to do. Level 3 is make recommendations and ask accordingly. So level 3 would say, hey, I think that you want me to do this. Is this what you want me to do? And then level 4 is ask and make recommendations routinely, just as a practice. When you're not sure what you're supposed to do and you want to take initiative,
Yeah.
you go to someone, you say, hey, boss man, I've noticed that you really do this a lot. I think you want me to do this. I just did it. Is this what you want me to keep doing? Wow. And so it's just the levels of initiative.
Wow.
A lot of times, like for my agents, I'll talk a lot about, be like, hey, you're at level 2 right now. I need you to get to level 4. Because asking what to do is fine, but it's actually not that much initiative. It's better than me waiting until told, right? I'd much rather have an agent call me and initiate, ask me what I want them to do versus me calling them and saying, hey, get off your butt. You got to go make some cold calls today. But what I'd love is for them to come and say, hey, Dillon, I spent the morning making 30 cold calls. Is this what you want me to keep doing, or is there something else you prefer?
Man, that's good.
So levels of initiative.
Wow.
Yeah.
What great
big impact.
What great wisdom to grow up with. Oh shoot, I had a thought and I lost it. It's gone. I lost it.
Isn't that the worst?
It was it's just getting to that stage now.
I feel like I'm already there, man. Once at Madeline, I feel like we would hire people, and I'd call to talk to Tom, like, Tom, hey, what's their name? We just hired them. What's their name? And Tom's like, Dillon, you're 30 years old. Like,
I know, you can't get it now.
I'm already struggling right now. I'm in trouble later.
Well, the other thing, I remember what I was going to say. You're talking about having been a business owner and a boss. I found that the people that made me feel the best were the ones where I never had to worry about stuff. So let me give you an example. Sometimes companies or organizations, you keep people hanging around way longer than you should, because you don't know how to approach it. Mm-hmm. But I want you to imagine this. Imagine you hired someone to paint your house. So, and you come outside your house and they're painting over the glass of the windows. Now, what would you do? Would you say, well, apparently they're painting on the windows. That's not the way to do it, but I hate to say anything.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that.
No.
You'd go, hey, hold on, wait a minute. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You don't want your windows painted? No, I don't. And you know what, guys? I think we better just wrap this job up because it's clear you don't know what you're doing. That's an exaggerated example, but nonetheless, you would immediately tackle that problem.
Right.
And if you say, look, I can't pay you for this work. You've painted over all the glass. This is not what I asked for. But so often employers do that. They bring people into their organization. They don't specify exactly what they want. Mm-hmm. And then when it doesn't happen very often, they either overjudge, and the person said, I thought you wanted the glass painted. That's what we do on all houses. Well, not mine. Should have said that.
Yeah.
Or they just say, oh, I hate to say anything. I don't want to be confrontational.
Yeah.
And then they're angry all the time about it. Well, you talk about it, and that's, again, it's full circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole culture thing and how you talk about stuff. So many problems are so easily solvable. I can tell you so many stories about people that finally just had the courage to just say it. Just say it.
Yeah. I mean, this is true of marriages too. This is
Same
true of
thing.
everything, man.
Stuff builds up, and it's okay to disagree. It's okay to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are mad at you.
Yeah.
That's life. Sometimes people are mad at you. Sometimes I may have to ask, you seem like you're upset with me, Dillon, so I'm ready. Just tell me what happened. And you might tell me, and I might laugh about it and go, man, I was an idiot. I'm sorry. And it's over.
One point I'll make on that, though, if you're going to ask that, make sure you're ready for the response.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of times people will be like, hey, man, what's going on? Talk to me. I'm ready. And then you're not actually ready. Because in your mind, you're like, I didn't do anything
and I go,
wrong.
that's a bunch of crap.
Yeah,
right?
no, you got to be ready to listen. You can't just write it off. If someone's feeling a certain way, there's a reason they're feeling that way.
Yeah.
Now, they might have been misled. They may have not had all the facts or whatever. But if you ask someone to tell you something, you need to be mentally ready to receive that thing. It might be painful too. It might not be what you're thinking. But you got to be ready to receive whatever words are about to be said. Otherwise, don't actually say you're ready for it.
That is. I so agree with that. And here's the other thing. So this maybe touches on the Chris Voss thing, but it's more about having dialogue, asking questions, is more about not defending but being curious. Mm-hmm. So you say, Mike, here's what really upset me about that. Now in my head, I'm thinking, you're nuts. There's no way, you oversensitive bastard, right?
Right.
But I have to tamp that down and say, I'm curious, what made you feel that way?
Yeah.
Right? And you start talking about it. And maybe you say something else and I ask another question. Well, I'm curious about this then. So what does that mean then? Right? So now I'm just being curious. Mm-hmm. And so you talk. Now, a couple of things could happen. You might talk for 5 or 10 minutes about why you're mad at me, and you could literally stop in your tracks and say, you know what, Mike? I think I got a little too dramatic with this. Now that I hear myself talking about it, I think I've been a little bit of a whiny baby about it.
Yeah.
Right. Or I might say, wow, I never thought of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I'm sorry. Right. And I get it now. I'm not just, but the immediate reaction of human beings is you say, Mike, the other day you said you were going to call me and we were going to go and have a cigar and you didn't. Mm-hmm. And you felt dissed, you felt disrespected and all that, but I didn't hear that. I go, hey, wait a minute, hold on. When was I supposed to call you? Well, now it's the walls are up and we're going to fight. So if I were just curious and said, wait a minute, what day was this? It was Tuesday. That was the day I was supposed to call? Yeah, remember? Yeah. We were having drinks the night before. You said Tuesday we're going to go. Well, I hear you talking. You might say, oh, wait a minute, it's the wrong Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Or I may say, oh, my gosh, you're right. I had the wrong Tuesday. Solved.
Yeah. And, humility crumbles pride. That's what humility crumbles
use
pride.
That. I'm going to use that.
I made that up as you were talking, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I did. I was just like, how do I want to phrase this?
I'm gonna,
Yeah, because humility crumbles pride, right? Like you walk into a conversation, even if you're the one to initiate it, so someone's mad at you, and you walk into that conversation humble and say, hey, man, I'm just going to assume I did something wrong.
I feel like something's not right.
You tell me what it is. It might have been them, and they could have still been mad at something. Who knows? But if you are humble, generous, like actually curious on what's going on, and you show humility, a lot of times they're going to do exactly what you said. They're going to be like, hey, man, you know what? Honestly, I've been mad about this. It's really not that big of a deal. It's really not that big of a deal. This is what you said to me that one time, and a lot of times you'll actually get an apology of people that were mad at you. When you're humble, but if you go in there.
I probably shouldn't have been that upset with you. I was. I'll be honest, I was, but and now that I think about it.
Yeah, now that you said something, it's kind of stupid. This is a little childish.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So
if you go in there guns blazing, like, hey, man, I heard you had a problem with me. What's wrong? And then it's just another level.
The walls come up.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the challenges, too, in any organization, businesses, too. Same thing is you can't solve problems because the walls are up. So now this is about me winning and you losing. This is about me protecting my territory. And I don't think people want to.
Right.
But we've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Mm-hmm. That bottom of Maslow's hierarchy.
Right.
That flight or fight sort of. And so when we feel attacked, it's absolutely, we're going to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And
The walls are up.
The
for
walls
sure.
are up. So we got to find ways to be curious.
Yeah,
As
especially
opposed
if you've
to
been
judgmental.
burned in the past, like, hurt people,
Yeah.
And so when you've been hurt in the past and someone comes at you hard, it just is like a PTSD roll in,
Oh man, here we go.
vicious cycle of, you're like, I've been burned before and it's not going to happen
Yeah,
twice.
you're not going to get the best of me, right?
And
Yeah, it's just being curious and coming from a place of love and not fear. Because judgment, it really is the opposite of love. Judgment is just never good because, we're all wrong a lot. So
Yeah, we talked about this the other day, man. I mean, like, imagine if everyone broke down their walls, the walls of fear, of pride, and just talked, learned what people were about, actually had legitimate, real conversations with people, asked good questions, they listened actively, not asking a question just so they could talk again.
Yeah, right.
And so I just think we in America would be in a better place, the world would be in a better place, businesses would be in a better place if people just practiced having conversations, not making assumptions. Right, assumptions are the absolute killer of relationships.
Yeah,
and if we just did, I mean, this is again, I talk to you about all the I talk about all this time to you. Like, this is why I started the podcast, to have real and authentic conversations with interesting people, experts, and entrepreneurs. Why? Because I think we live in a world where the pursuit of truth is frowned upon if it's offensive, and we talked about that. Mm-hmm. Whereas to learn and ask questions could be offensive. You might offend someone. The pursuit of knowledge is offensive. There's gonna be someone offensive. That's okay.
Yeah.
And anyway, and so that's the point. Like, you can't have a good conversation without risk offending somebody.
Yeah, and that's how we learn. That's how we become better people because, we're all flawed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, the truth isn't always popular, but it's always right.
Yeah.
And I think that the better we are at being skilled at communicating, and it's hard because we're built not to communicate well, to be honest. So it's a learned behavior to communicate well, but when we communicate well, we get much further. And honestly, I think in my role, in my work, I think we spend more time on that, is getting people to communicate well. And when they do, everything else is just details. It all happens.
I mean, imagine any side of the business that you can think of, and increased communication could only, like, imagine if the customers actually communicated with the company exactly what they wanted. And imagine if the company told the customers exactly the challenges they were working through, but that they were trying to accomplish it. And then imagine that the sales team was communicating with the engineering team exactly what the sales team needed, and the engineering team were telling crystal clear communication is only going to help.
Yeah. Well, and I think human beings also are built that in the absence of information, we always assume the worst. That's just how humans are built.
Yeah.
I know we're that way. If your oncologist said, look, I'm going to let you know how the results are. I'll call you at 3:00 on Tuesday. Yeah. At 3:01, she hasn't called you, and you're going, oh, my gosh, I'm going to die.
I'm dead.
I'm dead. This is bad news. She can't tell. And then she calls at quarter after, you're in the fetal position, crying.
You're already building your casket
she says,
in the garage.
And you say, hey, I just, sorry I'm running late here. I had an appointment, but everything's great. You're going to be fine. And what was all that about? But we worry about things we don't understand. We worry about when communication is fuzzy. We go to that place. When I'm not clear, I'm like, that Dillon guy. I don't know what he's got up his sleeve. We just go to this cynical place. Most people, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but
I think humans are naturally depraved and they seek darkness rather than light, and so I think it's a natural inkling for us to assume the worst, and so
because we want to protect ourselves,
right?
Because if it's going to be great, I have nothing to worry about, but if it's going to be bad, I want to be ready. So I'm going to be ready. But I think that sometimes
it's self-preservation. You know, it's funny. My wife called me out about something because, we just a month or so ago when the Babylon Bee guy came on, we had a couple videos pop off, about this, the people listening, we had a couple videos. So overnight, it seemed like we went from 700 subscribers to 1,500 subscribers. Now we're at 2,500 subscribers. We're monetized, we're making money. It should be it should have been just an absolute, just I'm grateful, I'm thankful, I'm whatever. And the whole time, at first I was like, this is insane, this is exciting. I'm grateful, I'm blessed. Thank you, Lord, for providing this. This is amazing. And then after maybe 2 weeks went by, and I posted a couple other videos. I posted a new podcast. The podcast didn't do very well. I'm like, great. I had my time in the sun. Now it's just back to
Okay, Eeyore.
You know, yeah, and it's weird, and you know why I did that? Because my wife had asked me how the podcast, the new one, I'm like, only has like 300 views, right? Well, if you would have asked me a year ago if a podcast episode got 300 views, I would have been like, that's incredible, because I was getting 30 views back then. But just because I experienced what 300,000 views was like.
But you're a golfer, so you know what this is like. One day you go out and shoot an unbelievable round. You're so proud as a peacock. Next time you go out, you shoot your normal round.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, up and down it goes. So, all right, another book I have to bring up.
Okay. And I have a point with that, what I was going to say too.
Dan Sullivan,
Okay.
The Gap and the Gain. And the premise of the book is basically this. When you live in the gap, you're constantly measuring where you are to where you think you should be. And you're a golfer, so we'll use that as an analogy. How many golfers you know that are frustrated with their game? Some guys are horrible.
Yeah.
Some guys are great. They're both complaining the same amount. How can that be? Because they're living in the gap. They see where they are, but they're going, yeah, but I want to be there.
Yeah.
But when you live in the gain, you do what you just did, where you say, wait a minute, I had 2,500 followers. I used to get excited over 30. Yeah. So even though my last podcast kind of went flat and yesterday's one was good and this one, I'm making progress. Yeah. So you're always having to.
Well, it's the perspective of the long game, right?
Absolutely.
And I think, and I think to my point, what I realized what I was doing, it was self-preservation, because hope is scary, and I'll explain what I mean by that. You start a podcast, you interview local business owners, or let's say you start a business and it's a small little business, and you're like, oh, I'm happy with this. If this is all it becomes, I'm okay with this, right? And let's say you're making widgets. Let's say you're making, you use the cupcake store a lot, right? Example.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So then let's just say you have a cupcake shop, and it's a cute little shop, and you're excited for it, and then maybe you keep steadily growing. Well, all of a sudden, in walks in Kim Kardashian, and she has Instagram up, and she takes a picture of your cupcake, and then the next day you get 1 million orders for cupcakes. You're like, well, I never thought I could maybe franchise this thing. I never thought all of a sudden things way past what you imagined this to actually be started to happen. Or you kind of wished it could happen, but you didn't think it was actually going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so for me, when I started the podcast, like I started and I told you this from the beginning, like I want this to turn out, I would love for this to turn out to be a career. But it's like, I'm like 0.2% of people that actually start podcasts actually make it a career. So while I wanted it to be the case, I kind of believed it, kind of didn't believe it. So then when those videos took off, those went viral, right? I started to get hope of like, this could actually happen. But then I think the self-preservation of saying, I don't want to get my hopes up so they're going to be destroyed. Mm-hmm. And so then what I was doing was saying, oh yeah, it's going okay. Like, I'm trying to figure it out. What I was really just doing was not letting myself get excited for the future, because I didn't want to be let down. And so my wife called me out on it the other day. She's like, hey, I want you to understand, like, you've been really negative when it comes to your podcast. And I'm like, I know I have. Like, I was like, I really don't feel like I have been. I just feel like I've been real and authentic. Back to my
there you go. Yeah. The raw and real. Yeah.
And, but she just brought an interesting point where it was just me self-preservation myself.
In case it doesn't work out, I can say, well, I never expected it to.
Exactly.
Right.
Versus, because that's way less embarrassing than jumping in head first, saying, hey, I know I'm going to do this, and it doesn't work out.
I'm going to have 1 million subscribers and go, hey, how's that going?
Yeah.
So,
but then when you say like, oh, well, it's just something I do for fun, and who really knows, it's a way easier pill to swallow when it doesn't work out. It's way less embarrassing. And so I think that's what I was doing. And it was just a really unique, eye-opening experience to me. And Trevor, my friend Trevor's called me out on it too. He's like, look, bro, you have an insane guest lineup coming up. You are meeting these great people.
Yeah.
Freaking enjoy it, man. Like, just enjoy it. Like, stop worrying about the future and if this is going to pan out or if this is going to blow up or if people are going to... Just be you and enjoy it.
So for people watching this podcast, I challenge them to watch your mannerisms when you talked about other topics, and now when you switched over to talk about podcasting, your energy level just went up, and you're fired up. And my opinion is, when I see entrepreneurs, they get fired up like that about something, that's a future successful entrepreneur, because you don't really care.
Yeah.
You don't care. You love this, and you believe that
absolutely.
you can make this into something even bigger than you thought. But yeah, you're probably doing some self-protecting, and I say screw that.
Yeah.
Make it what you want it to be.
Yeah.
It'll be. But worst case scenario, it doesn't go to what you want it to be, but you're going to love it anyways.
Yeah.
And I think I told you the other day about that interview Seinfeld did with some lady somewhere.
Yeah.
It was really good. But he said that. He said, I really never thought I'd make any money doing this. I just did my $100 a night gig and, and go to the next town. And he goes, but I was a single guy, I ate a lot of cereal and, that was my life. I was willing to go my whole life never making any real money because I love making people laugh. The rest of that story. I mean, not all the comedians are that way, but holy mackerel.
Yeah.
He didn't have any plans for this. But I think that common denominator is that I can't think of doing anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and that, and to your point, it's just weird, man. Like, it's tough to put a finger on it because, I say I didn't believe. It's like I did believe. Like, I literally, and you could talk to my wife. She's like,
you
oh, yeah,
believe
Dillon.
it.
I do believe it. But it's almost like when it happened and when it's happening right now in front of us, it's almost like, well, I didn't think it was going to be this fast.
Well, success can
It's
be
like-
very stressful too, though.
Yeah,
Be careful what you wish
that's
for.
the thing, right? And that's the thing, because then now, I think that's maybe a better way to put it. I really did, and from the get-go, you can talk to Tom, my admin, you can talk to my wife, you can talk to people like Dillon believes we kind of think he was actually kind of crazy on the people that he said he was going to interview, and have conversations with. And I'd be like, I tell my wife all the time, hey, I'm like, I just reached out to Jordan Peterson's camp, but I said this, and she would be like, are you sure they aren't, over here? I'm like, oh yeah, they're not going to come on my show now, but when my show reaches 100K, they might, and that's just always been the vision for me. But then when it started to actually happen, it was almost like this, like paralyzing, like, I don't know how to react to this because I thought it was possible. I just didn't know it would happen like now. Like it's almost always like, oh, it's going to happen in the future. But then when you really start living it and you start getting guests tomorrow I'm talking to Brandon Tatum, who's a massive spoiler alert to anybody if that podcast hasn't released yet.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
That's just a absolute huge opportunity. And so like things like that are happening. And it's almost like, I don't know.
Look how excited you are.
Yeah.
You dig
but I'm
this
also
stuff.
scared, man. Like literally nervous. Like it's like,
all right.
I tell Trevor all the time. It's like, I just don't want to screw up the opportunity that I've been given. So I feel a pressure to say, hey, like if I'm given an opportunity like this with these people and doing these things, I just don't want to mess it up.
What if I told you might screw it up?
I love how we're just going through like therapy. It's turned into like a big therapy session.
So, so what if all right, so you said, I just don't want to screw it up. All right, I know you don't want to screw it up, but you could.
Yeah, high probability.
It's a big deal,
Yeah.
right? I mean, look, going back to Jerry Seinfeld, how many times do you think he went up in front of a crowd, tried to make him laugh, and it didn't work? But yet, he's Jerry Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the journey is riddled with ups and downs and ups and downs. Yeah. So I don't know that there's any I could screw it up. It's just that one wasn't a good one. Or this one wasn't a good one. But
I'm reminded when you say that like the most successful people learn more from their failures than their successes.
I don't think I learned anything from my successes. In fact, I probably in some cases made me worse because I became sometimes, especially when you're young, become complacent, or you think you've got it all figured out, or especially early. I think the worst thing that could happen to a young person is start a business, and it just goes really, really well for years and years and years, and they never have any major setback because, and I had some of that, and when the first time I had a real setback, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And one, I wasn't ready for it. And I took it personally. I'm like, I did something wrong. Yeah. This is me. I'm a bad guy. I'm an idiot. I'm a dope. The reality is, then I talk to older guys and ladies, and they go, you'll go through 10 of those before you leave this earth. So just get used to it. Suck it up, buttercup, and get used to it. It's not your fault. It is what it is. And if it is your fault, all right, don't screw up again.
Yeah.
And, here I am. I didn't die. So same thing. Every journey is riddled with ups and downs. Yeah. And you're going to learn more in the downs than you are in the ups.
Well, that's the encouraging thing, right? And like literally,
Well,
I mean,
you're willing to do it.
yeah,
A lot
that's
of people
the thing.
don't want to do that, and I understand
It's
that.
hard to fail. It's not fun to fail.
No.
It's not fun to put yourself out there. It's not fun to do difficult things that when you fall flat on your face, it's not a fun experience.
Well, but I try to avoid that failure line. I just say there's success in learning. So there's times when you're successful and there's times you're learning, and the learning never ends. You can be 100 and you're still going to learn stuff. You can call your dad and say, "What are you learning today?" And he's still learning stuff. Might be
Right.
different than what I are learning because he's an older guy. But so you just one of my colleagues, Mark O'Donnell, once said, you have to have a beginner's mindset in anything you do. Even if you're a master at what you do, have a beginner's mindset. If you're Tiger Woods, have a beginner's mindset. Think about these pros. They have coaches. So, I mean, Tiger Woods is the greatest golfer ever, right? So
Right.
what is the coach going to help him with? He has a beginner's mindset. Even though, some of these guys are the greatest golfers in the world, they're like, I don't know. There's something I could do better, I think.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to find that. And I'm going to engage you to see if you can find it because I can't. I don't see it. And I think when we have that kind of vulnerability and open mindset and that learner's mindset, beginners, that's when you really grow. And I think great entrepreneurs have that beginner's mindset. So if you screw up,
And
you
never
say,
lose it either. And they never lose it.
No.
And that's the
no.
key.
So
Like,
I hope I don't screw it up. I hope you don't either. But if you do,
yeah.
you'll live to see another day. And you'll probably learn some really valuable stuff from it. Because if every podcast you ever did for the next 10 years was perfect, I would say, actually, I'd be privately thinking, hold on to your hat, pal, because something's coming and you are not going to be ready for it.
Yeah.
You just aren't. So what I wish for you or any great entrepreneur is a good balance, a good sprinkling of little catastrophes, because that's the part that makes you strong. That's the part that gets you ready. And after a while, when the hits come, you're just like, oh, yeah, it's another hit. All right, so what are we going to do? You've grown about it for a day or two, and you say, okay, move on. And
Well,
that's
it's like what you said. It's like, instead of being like, oh, man, this sucks, it's, hey, what can I learn from this? When those hits come, it's like, man, this sucked.
well, they're
Now-
learning opportunities.
Exactly.
You're not the victim because it's so easy to go, well, if this didn't happen and that didn't, whatever. All right, fine. Yeah, if the tornado didn't blow my house down, everything would be great. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, it'd be Christmas all year.
Yeah.
Right. So just see it as a learning opportunity. I know that sounds all like fluffy and rah-rah-y, but it's the damn truth.
Yeah.
And I maybe when I was in my 20s, I would have never listened to this podcast. I said, what a bunch of crap. Just get out there and do it. But you get older and you find out that this stuff is all true, that you really have to look for the learning opportunities and the things that go wrong. Okay to be a little PO'd about it and say, oh, geez, why me? Why did this have to happen? Give yourself that day or so of grace to grieve the process and move on. But after that, let's get to work, man. Get down to it. And because what I have learned is all those bad things, different things that have happened throughout my career, I look back on them now and say, man, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have learned this. And, man, I learned a lot from that, which also helped me with this new thing. And, so you might say, I just did a terrible podcast. It was awful. What did you do wrong? This, that, and the other. Well, guess what? You're probably not going to do it wrong again. Unless you're just a blind idiot and you don't want to pay attention to what you did wrong. But I know you're not, so you're going to think about all the things you do differently. Yeah. And the next one's better. Yeah. You just get 1% better every day.
Man, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you letting me just I feel like I should have had a couch and laid on the couch during therapy.
No, I think I'm the one that's sitting on the couch, right?
No, I don't know. Yeah.
So you make it easy. That's what makes you a good podcast host, because I just come in here and I start bearing my soul to you, you know, so.
Well, that's the goal, man. I mean, I never want people to listen and think that we're just pulling stuff out of our butts and just trying to say what's popular. Something happened. There was a YouTube comment that was just absolutely roasting me for something. And it was just really funny because I was talking to my buddy who's
I did that comment.
Oh, yeah, was that you on
that
a burner account? You know?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, you were, and with doing content, I'm going to say a lot of crap. I'm going to say a lot of things that I might look back on 10 years from now and be like, ugh, I thought I was right there.
It's tough putting stuff in the media, you know.
And so you kind of just either one of two people when you make content. Either you're going to always try to save face, and you're going to always try to tie up the loose ends, make yourself look as good as possible. Yeah. Or you can accept that you're flawed, You have problems like everyone else, and you're going to create a journey for everyone to walk through them with you. And so the goal of this conversation, this podcast, this show is for people they're going to listen to me misspeak. I'm going to get facts wrong. I'm going to sometimes crap the bed with guests, and that's just the reality of humans. We all do that stuff. And so if people can find solace as, hey, I'll show my bad side and I'll show my struggles, and if that encourages my guests to share struggles, that encourages my listeners to share struggles, we're all going to be in a better spot. There's just no use pretending that we're better than what we are, I think is my point. It doesn't, you look at celebrities and they seem like they have the whole world figured out and they have everything. And next thing you know, you look at their bio, they have 18 divorces, 47 kids, their life's in shambles, they're addicted to drugs, And so it's like, why should we pretend that we just have it all together? So you basically, if you ever decide to make content, you need to make a choice really early on. Either I'm going to try to pretend that everything's fine, or I'm just going to show people who I actually am. And your real followers are the ones that are going to be okay with just an imperfect person, because we all are.
We all are.
And so anyway, that's why I don't mind sharing the struggle that I go through, because when someone shares their struggles, even if it is embarrassing, or even if it is like, yeah, I don't really love the fact that I just put on YouTube how I'm feeling about this show. And it's true, it's honest, and hopefully people resonate with that,
Well, that's the beauty of podcasts too, is people can say what they need to say, and it's fascinating. And if the topic's not in your wheelhouse, then you don't have to watch it.
Yeah.
But you are good at getting people to talk. You're just a genuine, authentic person. So, and I think that's kind of contagious. Yeah. I think that's what it is if I'm in the room with someone who I feel like they're being genuine, authentic, well, then I feel free to do that, Yeah. And if you're in a room full of uptight people, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to stir the pot here. Yeah. So you do that really well. I don't know that I could host a podcast as well as you. You're a good conversationalist. And
appreciate that.
We have a lot of great conversations.
Off the air.
Off air,
we should honestly just hold a virtual recorder whenever we hang out.
Yeah, so maybe you do. I don't know.
That's how I get good. I just replay everything.
Yeah, replay it.
But man, this was fun. I feel like we could talk for another couple hours.
Likewise. I feel like it's great. I love hanging out and chatting with you, and this is it's been great. And I think I have been on the couch, so thanks for that. I needed that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think honestly, anyone that's listening, thank you for those that are still with us. This was great. Thanks for chilling with us today. Mike was on a year ago. It's been a year or almost a little over a year since you were on the first time.
Oh my gosh.
And it's cool to see where the show's gone, since you were one of the first people to even just be willing to come on the show.
You've done such a great job, Dillon. Like I said, you're a great conversationalist, and you get people to talk, and that's what we need. We need people talking. I've said, can't fix anything, can't resolve anything, can't have understanding or communication unless we just talk about it. 20 seconds of courage, 5 minutes of discomfort, and we can solve any problem. Mm-hmm. And you're good at lighting that fuse. Yeah. And so kudos to you, my man.
Well, I appreciate that. And I guess on that note, before I get too big of a head with Mike gassing me up, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Mike, thanks for coming on the show, man. Every time
thanks
you
for having me on your show.
We have great conversation about leadership. And if anyone wants to check him out, he is an EOS implementer. I mean, you're busy. But if any business owners want to reach out to Mike, you can definitely do so. Reach out to the show, and I'll get you guys connected. But I
appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I love hanging out with you, man.
Fun. We'll do it again.
You're the best, brother.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks, man.
All right. Great job.
Nice.
Oh, man, you're awesome.
You're so hot in here. Are you sweating?
It's a little hot, yeah.